Welcome to Around the Weird. Here's your host, the museum curator of the strange and unusual, Mr. Nothing.
Thank you, Mysterious Voice, and welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I found in my travels. It is Poetry Thursday, so I want to talk about some intriguing poetry that I've stumbled across. And today's poem is all about strangers that you meet in nightclubs. I am referring to Other Fugitives and Other Strangers by Rigoberto Gonzalez. For those who don't know, Rigoberto Gonzalez is a Mexican-American writer who's getting his work published for the past 20 plus years. He's written a number of books of poetry, as well as some Spanish language children's stories, which I think is pretty interesting, and some novels as well. And his poetry focuses on life as a Mexican American man, life in the LGBTQ because he is a gay man as well, and he's also it also focuses on loneliness and things like that. So pretty intriguing poet, glad that I found him. But without further ado, let's talk about this poem, Other Strangers, or Other Fugitives and Other Strangers. Get those mixed up. I'll read it, do a little bit of analysis, and we'll move on from there. Other Fugitives and Other Strangers. The nightclub's neon light glows red with anxiety as I wait on the turning lane. Cars blur past, their headlights white as charcoal. I trust each driver not to swerve. I trust each stranger not to kill me and let me cross the shadow of his smoky path. Trust is all I have for patrons at the bar. One man offers me a line. One man buys the kamikaze. Another drinks it. Yet another wraps his arm around my waist. I trust him not to harm my body as much as he expects his body to remain unharmed. One man asks me to the dance floor. One asked me to a second drink, another asked me home. I dance, I drink, I follow. I can trust a man without clothes. Naked he conceals no weapons, no threat, but the blood in his erection. His body unfamiliar, only temporarily. Pillow without loyalty absorb the weight of any man. Betray the scent of the men who came before. I trust a stranger's tongue to tell me nothing valuable. It makes no promises of truth or lies. It doesn't swear commitments. The stranger's hands take their time exploring. Undisguised, they do not turn to claws or pretend artistic skill or draw configurations of my flesh. They are only human hands with fingertips unsentimental with discoveries, without nostalgia, for what they leave behind. I trust the stranger not to stay inside me once he enters me. I trust him to release me from the blame of pleasure. The pain I exit with no greater than the loneliness that takes me to the bar. He says goodnight. I give him back those words, taking nothing with me that is his. The front door shuts behind me. The gravel driveway ushers me away. The rear view mirror loses sight of threshold, house, sidewalk, street. Driving by the nightclub, I pass a car impatient on the turning lane. My hands are cold and itch to swerve the wheel, to brand his fender with the fury of my headlights. But I let this stranger live, to struggle through the heat and sweat of false affections, anonymous and borrowed like the glass that washed my prints to hold another patron's drinks. In terms of analysis, that was Other Fugitives and Other Strangers. There's quite a bit worth talking about in the poem, and that in terms of narrative, the narrator goes to a bar. I presume this person is gay. They keep using the line he, and the narrator or the writer is a male, but that doesn't necessarily make it a poem, an LGBT poem. But given that Rigoberto is gay, it makes sense that he would put some of his own perspective into the poem. But yeah, he presumably goes to a nightclub, gay bar, and gets drinks from other people. Finally goes home with a stranger. There's no expectations that this is permanent. And then they head home, and the traffic is a little bit dangerous. So the poem is pretty much about anonymous sex, the idea of being anonymous, and putting your trust in strangers, which is a lot to ask sometimes, especially given, the history of anonymous sex in the gay community and AIDS and things like that. Historically, you couldn't have trusted strangers really to be protective, especially given that the United States government kind of ignored the AIDS crisis for so long. So, Rigoberto's doing a huge kind of thing and trusting another person. They note, like, trust is all I have for patrons at the bar. One man offers me a line, one man buys the kamikaze, another drinks it. And then you have a bunch of expectations of what is to come. And like the narrator notes that they can trust people who are naked. Naked he conceals no weapons, no threat but the blood in his erection. His bed unfamiliar only temporarily. Pillows without loyalty absorb the weight of any man, betray the scent of the men who came before. So you can kind of understand what you're getting out of this. If a person is naked, they're not concealing anything. All they have is their vulnerability. And I believe that you're at your most vulnerable when you're naked, because you can't really hide anything. Every scar, every aspect of your body is on full display. So I really kind of vibe with that aspect of the poem. But in your bed, you can tell a lot by someone's bed, but you can also get a sense of, how many strangers they might have been with before, unless the person washed their sheets, but even the sense might not go away. So you can kind of get a sense there. The act of sex also reveals a lot about somebody, like, you know what you're getting out of this anonymous sex, this one night stand. It's not a commitment. It's not anything, because you kind of don't want those commitments. The person in this poem wants to remain anonymous. At the beginning of the poem, they suggested, they were amongst strangers, and there was a lot of trust in those strangers, and that trust carried through the bedroom. But then they relate it back to the bar at the end of the poem. They say, "But I let this stranger live to struggle through the heat and sweat of false affections, anonymous and borrowed like the glass that washed my prince to hold another patron's drink." So showing that even though you went to the bar, there's no real proof that you went there later, because your prints are gone. People might not remember that you were there unless you did something pretty destructive. This entire process has been kind of anonymous, and it relies completely on trust in that anonymousness, a word I always have trouble saying. Even though it talks about being anonymous and not having to worry about someone, there's still a sense of trust in this poem, a sense of trust that we have in our fellow members of the community, fellow members of the LGBT community, fellow drivers and whatnot. It's not completely anonymous. There's you still gotta kind of rely on the people who are around you. Anyway, those are my thoughts on Other Fugitives and Other Strangers. Very interesting poem. I didn't talk about the term fugitives. Who are these people, like, fugitives from? Given that they're part of the LGBT community, they might be fugitives from society because society looks down on people who are gay, bisexual, transgender, things like that. So something important to consider there. But yeah, if you have any thoughts on this poem, let me know in the comments below. I think it's super fun, very important to read. I'll put a link to it in the description. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that more people can find out about this poet or this poem, or even Poetry Thursday if they want to go out and do some poetry there. And until then, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and anonymous travels. Farewell.